Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jim Knotts, the President and CEO of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, and I'll be your Master of Ceremonies for today. It is my pleasure to be the first to welcome you to the annual Veterans Day ceremony at the Wall. Before we begin the formal program, I would like to recognize all of the Gold Star family members we have with us here today. The mothers, fathers, wives, siblings, spouses, nieces, nephews, and the sons and daughters in touch. All those who have experienced the loss of a loved one and know all too well the sacrifices that our military families make. And finally, to those still waiting for the return of their loved ones who are listed as missing, thank you for joining us. I'd also like to take a moment to thank the Wall volunteers. They're the folks you see in the yellow jackets and the yellow hats, and the staff of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund for all they do year-round to honor veterans and preserve the memorial. They truly put everything they have into making the experience of every single visitor at the Wall as meaningful as it can be. And my last thank you today goes to our 35th anniversary commemoration sponsors, PBS, Alan Buckaloo, William Murdy, Edie and Ed Ross, Mr. and Mrs. Frederick W. Smith, Land of the Free Foundation, PenFed Credit Union, the Slater Foundation, USAA, and Wells Fargo. Thank you for helping us make today's ceremony and all that we've done this year to mark the 35th anniversary of the Wall possible. Before we begin our program today, we'll pause to recognize our POWs and MIAs. I call your attention to our POW MIA chair, which occupies a place of dignity and honor on our stage. Let us always remember and never forget their sacrifices. And now I'd like to start our program today with an invocation. Please welcome our chaplain, Major Luis A. Garayua III, who will lead us in the invocation.
Would you please join me in prayer? Heavenly Father, as we celebrate the 35th anniversary of this Wall, let us always remember those that have served and those that are here today and those that are not here today. We commemorate those names that are on the wall. And Lord, we pray for those that are here today that still carry the scars from service in Vietnam. We ask this in your precious and mighty name. Amen.
And now I would like to introduce the Joint Armed Forces Color Guard from the Military District of Washington for our presentation of colors. Color Guard, please present the colors. If you would stand, please. To sing the national anthem, please welcome Master Sergeant Kevin Benier of the President's Own United States Marine Band.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Please remain standing while Army Lieutenant General Charles N. Peety leads us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and remain standing as the color guard retires the colors.
Thank you. My name is Lieutenant General Chuck Peety. I'm the Judge Advocate General of the Army, and on behalf of our Acting Secretary, Ryan McCarthy, and General Mark Milley, our Chief of Staff of the Army, and if I may add, my father and father-in-law, who are both Vietnam veterans, I thank you for being here and for the privilege of leading you in our Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd please place your hand over your heart and join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, sir.
Hold, right shoulder. Oh. Hold, holster. Oh.
Please be seated. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund hosts this ceremony each year in partnership with the National Park Service. At this time, I'd like to welcome the Secretary of the Interior as our partner in today's ceremony. Secretary Ryan Zinke is a former Navy SEAL. As a veteran, he certainly understands the importance of remembering the sacrifices of those who serve our nation through military service. And we're extremely pleased to have him join us for a few days ago to read names listed on the wall. Welcome, Secretary Zinke.
Well, happy Veterans Day. You know, all of us have a different experience about Vietnam. My experience was growing up in a little town called Whitefish, Montana. And every Veterans Day, a parade would go by. My grandfather, who owned a Chevrolet dealership, used to bring me to the curb and give me a flag. And I remember the veterans marching by. And the time the veterans would march by the year and the war they fought. I remember the doughboys They had their weapons shouldered, and they marched brilliantly, followed by the World War II veterans. And at the time, there was a lot of World War II veterans. And you recall the World War II veterans growing up in my lifetime were always the ones, the civic leaders that were in charge of the Lions Club and the Kiwanis Club, and they were the icons and the pillars of our community. And then the Korean War. My stepfather was a Marine, Semper Fi. He fought in the Korean War, and they marched. And then I remember as a child looking at the Vietnam veterans. Up front, you always marched a little differently. The war was a different war. The monument behind us is a different monument than all the other monuments in this great mall. If you can compare the monument to the World War II monument, the glory, the size, the majestic of that monument, compared to the monument behind us that lies low on the horizon. When I was a congressman, on the 50th anniversary of the war, one of my greatest honors was to give pins to the veterans that served in the Vietnam War. And the experience of the Vietnam War was different than mine. The war in Vietnam came to me. I remember watching it with Walter Cronkite every night. I remember my parents with me watching the war. When you came home, it was a different experience than what I experienced. The number of veterans that served that war always talk about coming into either San Francisco, taking off the uniforms, throwing them in trash cans. That's a different experience than what I experienced. When I came home was adulation, thanks, support your troops, bands. And a lot of the reason why I received what I did in my generation is because you did not. I think as a nation, we should be ashamed at how we viewed your service, your dedication. The monument behind me, I think, is not a tribute to victory or defeat. It's a tribute to remembrance. We should never run away from the history of our country. We should learn. When I served in the SEAL teams for 23 years, in 1985, most of my instructors were SEALs that had served in Vietnam. They cut their teeth in the jungles and the rivers. I learned a lot from those fine warriors. I've learned a lot from you, those that have fought. I've learned commitment, dedication, sacrifice. And I thank you. I'll tell a quick story why I say Semper Fi to every Marine I see. As I fought with General Mattis in Fallujah, I can tell you I sleep better at night knowing General Mattis has the military. And I got to tell you, you know, God loves us because General Kelly's in the White House. But when I was in Fallujah, I was at the front lines, and I was the deputy commander of Special Forces in Iraq. And we were looking at what was going on in Fallujah, and General Conway, later became the Commandant of the Marine Corps, and General Mattis, who was the 1st Marine Division Commander. I was showing him on the front lines what we were doing, where we were going, where the safe houses were, where the snipers were, and kind of laying out our order of battle. And it kind of went on, and this young sergeant next to me, and bear in mind I'm the commander, this young sergeant grabs me by my collar and nearly throws me down. I kind of get up, shake myself off, and I'm a little red in the face. I go right up to him, and he goes, "Sir, they're shooting at you." And for your Marines, Semper Fi, thank you. So lastly, I just want to express how grateful I am to be your secretary and how grateful our nation is for you magnificent Vietnam veterans. And for those family members today, share in the understanding that we are a better nation for your service. With that, God bless.
Thank you, Secretary Zinke. And now please welcome Diane Carlson Evans, a Vietnam veteran, nurse, and founder of the Vietnam Women's Memorial Foundation.
Thank you. We are grateful to be here for the 35th anniversary because it means we're all survivors. We're here, we're together. And exactly 1 year from today, we'll celebrate another anniversary, the 25th anniversary of the dedication of the Vietnam Women's Memorial, which stands behind you and designed by Glenna Goodacre. One of the women whom this memorial honors is with us here today to share her story as an Army nurse in Vietnam. We are very proud of Kate O'Hare Palmer. She was commissioned as a 2nd lieutenant in the Army Nurse Corps in 1967 from Seal Beach, California, at the ripe old age of 21. She served as an operating room nurse and emergency room nurse at the ripe old age of 21, at the 2nd Surgical Hospital in Lai Khe, and then the 312th Evacuation Hospital in Chu Lai in 1968 and 69. Kate came home like most of us, just wanting to get on with her life, have a family, and continue with her nursing career. There were bumps in the road. However, her commitment to her fellow veterans has always been there. Kate's career in nursing has spanned 30 years. Her story can be found in the book Officer, Nurse, Woman by author Kara Dixon Vuick. Upon returning home, she completed her BS degree in nutrition at UC Berkeley. She has held the Vietnam Veterans of America National Women Veterans Chair for the past 5 years. She has worked with legislators and community members at the state and national level, fighting for veterans' rights and benefits. Kate never gave up in her fight to care for veterans. She continues to sit on the FVA Medical Center Women's Health Committee and works with various education committees at the high school and college levels to enhance the knowledge of women veterans. Please give Kate O'Hare a warm welcome.
Thank you, Diane, for that wonderful introduction. It's amazing to me. I've been coming here for years, sitting out there with you all, and now I'm up here to tell my story. And I wanted to say that this is a special anniversary, the 35th. I was here for the 25th for the parade. This is amazing. Last month, I opened up a fortune cookie, and it said, "You will be traveling and coming into a fortune." Well, I traveled across from California to here, and here's my fortune, my brothers and sisters. Welcome home. I want to share just a short bit about my time as an Army nurse in Vietnam, my transition home, and the current needs of women veterans who have served in the military. My military service truly began in my home because both my parents were in the Army Air Corps during World War II. And my mother scrambled eggs in the morning and was teaching us Morse code. Did-it-it, da-da-da, did-it-it. I could have used that SOS a few times in Vietnam. My older brother, Tom, was an in-country veteran in 1965 and 66. I saw his pictures come home. He was in a hospital there, and I wanted to help. I was a nursing student. It was that simple. Upon graduation, I raised my right hand with 3 of my friends, and we took the oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies. I believe this. I am a constitutionalist. The war was permeating all our lives, and I didn't know how much then my heart, my mind, and my soul would be tested. I went to Vietnam in June of '68, the day after Robert Kennedy was assassinated. Within 2 hours of hitting Chu Lai, I was in the hospital operating room, scrubbed in. After 3 weeks, I began to wonder how I was going to make it. Working between the emergency and operating rooms, I saw injuries and carnage that no one could be prepared for, even though I trained at a 5,000-bed LA County General Hospital. I was grateful for the training that I received in the Army before I went over, and it helped me with my first tracheostomy to save a life. The teamwork of all the medics, nurses, and doctors that I was able to work with was hard to beat and will be forever remembered. We were a team. We supported the 1st Cav and AmeriCal and Marine divisions in I Corps in '68. Some of us were either dating, engaged, or married to men who were also serving in the military. So not only were we caring for those in our hospital, we were worrying, would we see our guy come in on a litter? The 312th Evacuation Hospital Reserve Unit came up to Chu Lai, and 2nd Surge was sent down to 3 Corps to Lai K, and we changed our mission to support Big Red 1. I know there's a lot of you here. In the spring of '69, the Long Range Reconnaissance Patrol brought to our hospital American soldiers who had been held as POWs in Cambodia. They were severely mutilated, some of their genitals cut off, and they were barely alive. One of them asked me to let him die. He didn't want to go home like that. I just hugged him. My duties were never ending. My hands continued to work, but my compassion was being drained. My soul was tearing, and no one that is in a war ever wants war to continue. The robot Kate took over those last few months in country. It was too much. Coming home to Travis Air Force Base and bust into Oakland Depot, we had protesters throw rotten vegetables on us. We were not prepared for that. I was buffered somewhat in the early 70s by being at Fort Stewart, Georgia with my husband, and I worked at a local hospital while the South Vietnamese soldiers were being trained to fly helicopters back in Vietnam. They were getting ready to go over. However, the war followed me home. An unexpected thing happened to me. I started having dreams, bad dreams, blood dreams, covered in blood because I was an operating room nurse. They started intruding into my daytime life, and I called them my daymares. After being in Vietnam and being so strong, I felt so weak and scared, and I didn't know what to do. It broke up my marriage because I didn't want to tell my husband, after being so strong, that I was so scared and weak. So those memories were relegated to a subconscious, and I returned to San Francisco and finished college. One night while I was working at the VA San Francisco, a patient came out of his room and up to me and said, "You were my masked angel. I recognize your blue eyes and your voice, and I will never forget when you said to me, 'You're safe now. You will go home.'" It was stunning to me to meet somebody that was alive. We cry for all these names. We cry for all these men and women that died. But to meet somebody that made it back was the beginning of our healing. The dedication in 1993 of the Women's Memorial was an ecstatic day for us. We women were back together and acknowledged. The effort, energy, and support to get this project completed were Herculean. And on that Veterans Day dedication, we were greeted by our brothers. Many had their military records and were looking for their nurses, clerks, women they worked with in intelligence or aircraft maintenance. They were looking for the American Red Cross workers who had flown into their LZ. These thank yous and hugs that we got and continue to get every time we come here are so warm and so amazing to us. Diane's message in Circle of Healing was truly begun. The spiritual component of our healing was weaving through us, and it was only the beginning of a long road home for many of us. I'm grateful to the Vet Center because they really helped me. They gave us back our pride and honor in our service when we were feeling less than whole. During our Vietnam era, 2% of the military were women because there was a cap on how many women could serve. Now there's almost 15% women that serve. Over 250,000 served during the Vietnam era, but it's much more than that now. What I wanted to mention, because there's still many areas that need advancement, and we continue to help with that. Women experience toxic exposure related to cancers and PTSD like our fellow soldiers. The Vietnam Veterans of America and other major veteran service organizations have worked tirelessly to help get that Toxic Exposure and Research Act passed last year. But that's only the beginning. You need to keep on, everyone, so that we get the benefits and the care that we deserve after toxic exposure. It's for our children and our grandchildren now. Timely care is needed at the VA healthcare. Obstetrics and gynecological care should be standard in all VA hospitals. It's a goal, but it hasn't been met yet. And infertility in both women and men that serve in country or serve in other areas today that have toxic exposure is something that we need more work on. VA benefits need inclusion of comparable claims and adjudication for women veterans. Suicide and homeless rates for women veterans are really on the rise, and we need to look at that and help. Military sexual trauma care is a sore point. In 2014, we had a bill passed that was supposed to help take care of that. It's not enough, and we need to say no more ever again. The Forever GI Bill that just passed will be greatly used by our veterans that have been delayed entry back to school for either family, mental health, or medical reasons. The majority of us veterans, all of us, we have gone home, served in our communities, been in places of leadership, and we've continued to work with ourselves and others. We need to stand, work, and live together always because we are special. We are. Thank you. I'm proud to be a veteran and welcome home.
Thank you, Kate. It is now my pleasure to introduce Maya Lin. Maya was a student at Yale when she won the design competition for the memorial that thrust her into the national spotlight. Over the last 35 years, she has gone on to have a very successful career as a designer and artist. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Maya Lin.
Thank you. I am so deeply honored to be here today, Veterans Day, the day our country sets aside to honor our nation's veterans. The design of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial was always meant to do just that: remember and honor the veterans who served in the Vietnam War, and remember those who did not come back. It's hard to believe it's been 35 years since its dedication. Almost 37 years ago, I stood here for the first time, looking at this beautiful park. I had no idea what was to come over the next 2 years. I stood here and had a simple impulse to cut open the earth and to polish the earth's open sides. Now, to realize this design was not an easy journey. It was full of controversy and emotions on all sides. In 1982, at the wall's dedication, I was here, and at that time, I was met by a very angry, very emotional Vietnam veteran right here on the eve of the dedication. And as he raged at me, I could not help but to think how the pain and memories that that veteran was experiencing that made him lash out at me signified that the memorial was beginning to work. By creating a space that would allow a returning veteran to remember that time, and although those memories would at times be emotionally charged and at times painful, it is only when we can honestly face that loss and that pain that we can begin to overcome it. And that cathartic healing process that has become so much a part of the space was always at the heart of this design. I've been fortunate through the years to have received so many heartfelt thanks and letters from veterans, from family members who have lost a loved one, from a psychiatrist who helped veterans with PTSD, who wrote of how the final step of his therapy was to bring veterans to the wall. But it is I who need to thank all of you for your service and sacrifice. It has been a deeply moving experience for me. At the time, I must confess, it wasn't the easiest of projects. I, too, was the average age of a Vietnam service member. I was 21 going on 22. And though my battle and what we all went through to build this is nothing compared to what you endured, maybe it, too, was part of the story of the Vietnam War and its aftermath. I also want to acknowledge and give thanks to those who were instrumental in realizing this design. The small group of Vietnam veterans who worked so hard to set up the idea, to get congressional authorization, to hold the competition, and then to weather an incredible political firestorm to get it built. To Jan Scruggs, the founder of the VVMF, whose idea was to build a memorial, who was then aided by a small group of dedicated Vietnam veterans: Robert Dubeck, Ron Gibbs, Jack Wheeler, Colonel Don Shate, John Woods, some of whom are here today, and sadly for those who are not still with us. They fought so hard to help realize this design. And to Cooper Lecky, the architects of record, to Henry Arnold, the landscape architect who had originally designed this beautiful park in Constitution Gardens, to J. Carter Brown of the Fine Arts Commission, and so many commissioners who shepherded the project through the numerous planning meetings in D.C., and to so many senators and congressmen, generals, veterans, Gold Star families, and volunteers who all made this memorial reality so that it can stand today and have the effect that it does on millions of visitors each year. It wasn't the easiest of designs to understand before it was built, since it connects to you in a very personal and psychological way. My task as the artist was to keep that design simple and pure, from the politics, from the controversy, from serious alterations, and for all the myriad design details that help make this design what it is today. I envisioned cutting open the earth and polishing the earth's open sides. The walls would not be massive, but instead thin and light, so that the names alone become the object, that the walls would be polished to a mirror shine, so you see yourself reflected in the names, and that the depth would be enough to offer you refuge, but not enough to become oppressive, that it had always to be of human scale, and that as you descend, the names rise up to meet you. And of utmost importance, that you would be able to find your time on the wall and connect with your fallen colleagues. I was intently focused on creating a work that would talk to each one of you individually, yet also to have you seen together as a whole, as a family, and to see yourself reflected in both the Washington Monument and the Lincoln Memorial, so that you and your service would become a part of the very fabric of our country, so that you become an honored and storied part of our nation's history. I cannot imagine what you endured overseas, only to come home and not be welcomed home by the country that asked you to serve. I believe so strongly that the politics of that war had been so divisive that this memorial had to rise above that this memorial could not let the politics of the war color your service, your sacrifice, and your loss. We must never forget, ever, the heroism and sacrifice that you and your fellow veterans have made for our country. And if this memorial has helped to welcome you home and to help heal some of the turmoil and pain of that war, and to embrace you and honor you in our nation's capital, then I am deeply honored to have played my part in your story. Thank you.
Well, I know every single one of us here today would like to come up to Maya at the end of the ceremony and offer their personal thanks. She actually has to leave quickly and take a flight to London. But I think we all can use the loudness of our applause to let her know exactly how much her design, this memorial, means to all of us. And it is now my distinct honor to introduce our keynote speaker for today, Vietnam veteran, enlisted in the Army, senator from Nebraska, and of course, chairman of our 35th anniversary committee, 24th Secretary of Defense, Chuck Hagel.
Jim, thank you. Secretary Zinke, to all of our distinguished leaders that I have the privilege of sharing the podium with, thank you to our Vietnam veterans, their families, to all of our veterans, all here, thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing a special day for not just Vietnam veterans and their families, but all of our veterans and our active duty military men and women. And to you, Maya, again, your presence, your words reflect as well as anyone can what this memorial means, what it has meant, and it will continue to mean to future generations. So, Maya, thank you once again. I want to add my personal thanks to the group of individuals that Maya mentioned, starting with Jan Scruggs, his founding board. Some are here today. So many people that were part of working through the difficulty of getting this memorial built at a difficult time. Maya, you mentioned some members of Congress, and there are two specific individuals that I have had the pleasure of not just serving with, but getting to know over the years, but two United States senators without whose support I don't think this memorial would have been built. Senator John Warner from Virginia and the late Senator Mac Mathias from Maryland. These two individuals really made it happen. 35 years ago today, this memorial was dedicated. It was built to honor, remember, and recognize the sacrifices of over 58,000 Americans and all the men and women who served in a confusing and unpopular war in a very distant land. This memorial was built for future generations, so they would learn from this war and would always remember that wars have serious and lasting consequences. I said in my remarks at the groundbreaking for this memorial 35 years ago, there is no glory in war, only suffering. But with all the suffering Vietnam veterans endured and saw, they also witnessed uncommon courage and compassion. There was heroism all around, but mostly it was that they did the job their country asked them to do. Their commitment to each other and their individual common decency and belief in their country sustained them. Nearly 3 million American men and women served in Vietnam. They returned home not asking for favors or special recognition. They didn't wallow in self-pity or the lack of thanks or respect that they did not receive. They rebuilt their lives, understanding better than most that the price they paid included a large measure of injustice. Not all succeeded. Many struggled and still struggle from that experience in that faraway land. As I wrote these remarks this week, I looked at photos of my brother Tom, who served with me side by side in Vietnam, who is here today. My brother Tom and my father in the South Pacific during World War II. As I looked at those pictures, I wondered what a 21-year-old Charlie Hagel and his buddies were thinking in 1944. Wars are fought by human beings. Machines don't fight wars. People fight wars. Men and women fight wars. Those who survive wars are either embittered or inspired to help make a better world. Like all veterans of America's wars, Vietnam veterans chose the latter course. War gives one clarity. It helps you see what is really important in life. All Vietnam veterans should be proud of that hard-earned clarity and their service. We should be proud of each other. Each generation faces its own unique challenges, unique to their time in history. These challenges are not of the soldiers' making. Different times, different wars, different political currents, all dictate wars and reasons for fighting wars. Every generation of Americans answered their country's call. And today's veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan and our current service members are no different. Vietnam veterans answered their call and served with honor. Historians have written that the common equation for mankind throughout history that has determined the strength and success of societies is challenge, response. Challenge, response. how each generation responds to the challenges of its time. Those societies that responded well, learned, adapted, and adjusted always prospered and helped make a better world for all people. Vietnam veterans responded well to their generation's challenges, strengthening the foundations of a special country with special people. Their recognition came far too late, but look around you now. It is here today. I've always believed that the greatest responsibility of leaders is to leave their institutions and those they lead better than they found them, to serve as role models. I've often heard from our servicemen and women today and from Iraq and Afghan war veterans that they looked to the Vietnam veterans for courage and inspiration. Vietnam veterans did serve as role models and are now the senior statesmen of the veterans community, just as the World War II and Korean War veterans before them. Last week, I attended the groundbreaking for the Eisenhower Memorial to be built near the Capitol, reminding me that it was the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, this memorial, that led the way for the next two American War memorials to be built on these sacred grounds of Lincoln. As I listened to the Eisenhower Memorial speakers reflect on the greatness of this soldier statesman, a theme emerged clearly that captured Ike's life: humility, dignity, and quiet leadership, hallmarks of veterans of every war. Vietnam veterans were no different. To our Vietnam veterans, celebrate your day of recognition. You've earned it, you deserve it, and thank each other, for you are the quiet heroes of your generation. God bless you all. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Secretary Hagel, sir, you are a true public servant, and I am honored to call you friend.
Thanks, Jim. Thank you.
Allow me to direct your attention to the representatives of several of the nation's leading veteran service organizations. Many of them are leaving the stage. For many years, these service organizations have joined our tradition of laying wreaths at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in honor of the fallen. While the wreath layers get into position, I'd like to share just a few highlights of what's been a busy year for the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, the founders of the wall. Recently, the effort to put a face to every name on the wall passed a major milestone. Of the 58,318 photos we've been seeking, less than 4,500 photos are left to meet our goal. I would ask you, please, if you have photos of anyone on the wall, please make sure they are part of our wall of faces. You can find it through our website, vvmf.org. We also inducted 412 Vietnam veterans into the In Memory Honor Roll, which honors those men and women who served in the Vietnam War and later died as a result of their service. As we do each year, we inducted them into the honor roll the Saturday of Father's Day weekend. And we do it on the knoll right over here, overlooking the wall. In March, we commemorated the groundbreaking for construction of the wall 35 years ago. And we were lucky enough to have remembrances from the retired Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund president and founder, Jan Scruggs, and the first executive director of the fund, Robert Dubeck, who is with us here today. For Memorial Day, Jan was our master of ceremonies, And our speakers were Ken Burns and Lynn Novick, co-directors of the recently released documentary called The Vietnam War. We released public service announcements starring Gary Sinise, Ken Burns, Lynn Novick, and the incomparable Anne Margaret. Thanks to all of them for supporting our efforts. And we are ending our anniversary commemoration this week with the reading of the names, honoring Maya Lin, and hearing from the only enlisted Vietnam veteran ever to serve as Secretary of Defense, Chuck Hagel. Through all of these activities, and with all of our speakers, we maintained the commitment the wall was built on. Never forget. I will now read the names of the organizations as they lay their wreaths today. I would ask you to please stand if you're able. While the wreaths are being laid, you will hear bagpiper Chris Jackson playing Amazing Grace for the 19th year. Today's ceremony will close with the playing of taps by Master Sergeant Daniel Orban Jr. of the President's own United States Marine Band. The organizations laying wreaths: National Park Service, Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, Vietnam Women's Memorial, American Gold Star Mothers, Operation Freedom Bird, Paralyzed Veterans of America, Gold Star Wives of America, the 101st Airborne Division, 1st Cavalry Division Association, Sons and Daughters in Touch, 5th Battalion, 7th Cavalry Association, 25th Infantry Division, Military Order of the Purple Heart, Verizon Veterans Advisory Board, National Dusters, Quads, and Searchlights Association, Vietnam Veterans of America, 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock PTSD class, Washington, Association of Vietnam Veterans of America, Vietnam Memorial Volunteers and Friends, Jewish War Veterans of the USA, Tan Sanut Association, Khe Sanh Veterans, the American Legion, Veterans of Foreign Wars, Rolling Thunder, Chapter 1 of Maryland, 39th Engineer Battalion Alumni Association, AMVETS, 3rd Battalion, 8th Infantry, 82nd Airborne Association, and the 1st Marine Aircraft Wing. We ask that audience members remain standing and at attention until taps has been played and the honor guard has been dismissed.
Honor Guard, you are dismissed. This concludes our ceremony. Thank you for coming, ladies and gentlemen.